the lineage of Musar. Not that it has to repeat a taste that existed in previous years, but it's just that it has the vibrancy, the acidity, this quirk, this tweak that happens at Musar that really defines Musar. It has to be there. If a wine is too perfect, it's not Musar.
Welcome to the wine-centric show inside the Farrington Relais Chateau cellar. And we go from Pittsburgh, North Carolina, all the way out to Lebanon. And with me, I have the bâtisseur of the Bekaa Valley, Mr. Marc Hochar from Chateau Musar.
Hello, Matt. Very happy to be here on the show.
I'm really happy to have you. One thing has been really gnawing at me. I have to assume that being Serge Hochar's son,
yes,
carries a lot of weight. I mean, this man, I had the pleasure of meeting him in New York somewhere around 2010. He's everything that it was said he would be: magnanimous, eccentric, gregarious, all the things. I imagine that's got to be a lot to fill those enormous shoes.
Well, I'm lucky in a sense that I have my brother as well.
Yeah.
So we each fit a different part of what Serge, my father, was doing. Gaston, my brother, has been at the winery 30 years. And so he spent a lot of time with my father, 20 years before he passed. More on the production side, the wine tasting, the blending and all that part. And even though I was a little bit involved, that was really his remit since he was based there. And I was traveling with my father.
Okay.
So really going around, initially not the US, initially Asia. And when I joined in 2010, I told him, I think we need to develop Asia further. So I started looking for importers there. Within a year, he wanted to follow me and, come with me. Not follow me. I mean, I needed him to come, but once I had started, developing, I needed obviously his knowledge, his experience and everything, to do all the tastings. So that lasted for a couple of years. And then, he didn't want me to come to the US, because he was having so much fun here.
He's taking it off for himself.
Yes. But then, so I had to negotiate. So and he loved Asia when we started traveling there. And so I would tell him, okay, you want to come to Asia next trip? I have to come with you to the US. So that was the deal. And eventually, I started really covering, alongside with him, different markets. And so, we were ready to transition when things happened.
So what I'm gleaning from that is the time spent with him, kind of understanding his presentations, going to Asia and then the US, you kind of felt comfortable filling issues there that way.
Oh, yes. It's not easy. And we have a different style.
Yeah, don't take anything away. You're charismatic and elegant and well-spoken and have wonderful stories as well.
When I talk to people who attended some of the tastings with my father and some with myself, I think the end message is the same in terms of the philosophy of what we do, the approach we have, what it means, what it is to taste wine, how you embrace wine into your life and how life embraces you with wine in the same way. So that, I think, message crosses in the same way. It's just that my father, if you asked him a question, he would never answer the question, basically. So I answer the question. I answer it in my own way.
Yes.
But he would just say, I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to talk about something else.
Right.
And so it's a slightly different approach. But I mean, he could get away with it because he had a bit more gray hair than I do, and had spent much more time, obviously, making wines, 55 vintages in total. I didn't have this when I started, so I could not get away with what he would do.
Right. He had some gravitas when he walked into a room, for sure.
Yes. And now it's a bit different, but still.
Okay. I want you to tell us all about, this place, the Bekaa Valley, Lebanon. People don't think about Lebanon, but why we're talking about your dad before we get away from talking about Serge, there was a seminal moment when he told your grandfather, who started the winery in 1930, your grandfather did. And then at some way it was decided that your father was going to be part of the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened after that?
Well, at that point, the story goes, and again, I wasn't there. And that's what, my father and to some extent my uncle also relate, was that my grandfather asked my father to join. He was in his 20s at the time, hadn't even studied wine,
Mhm.
and asked him to come and join and help him. And my father said no. He was asked a second time, no. Asked a third time. Then he said, okay, I'll come, I'll help you, but you have to leave. You as in his father. Um, and the idea was that he wanted basically to make the wines himself. Although he had um, no real idea of how to make the wines. But I think what he had was, my father was a very philosophical person in a
Mhm.
sense. And so his approach to wine was taste, because he loved taste, um, processes in terms of how you make the wines, but also philosophy and how does wine link into life? How does wine link into your everyday experience of what you do with your family, with love, with work, and how it's connected with that. And so his approach was very philosophical, and so he looked at history. He looked at the wine um, history of Lebanon, which dated back to 6,000 years ago with the Phoenicians producing wines. And he thought, okay, if we're in Lebanon and our history and our real forefathers were the Phoenicians who produced wines, we should do the same again.
Mhm.
So why bother with technology? Why bother with doing things the way the French were doing it, or the Italians, or anywhere else? Let's do it the way it was done, probably at home. And so that's when he started producing the wines in what he then called the non-interventionist approach, which is not using yeasts for fermentation, so natural fermentation that happens at the winery. Um, no additives, no filtering of the wines, of the reds, no fining of the reds, not even sulfur.
Yeah.
At the beginning. Right?
You guys were the OG natural winemaking. Like this is really natural winemaking before it's even thought of like, oh, I want to be cool, so I'm going to make my wines natural. You're just thinking about the ancient world and thinking this is how they did it, so it makes sense that we'll honor that tradition. Was there ever a time? Well, so how did it work out then between Serge and Gaston, your grandfather? Like, your grandfather say, okay, go ahead, take it over, or was there some compromise where he was somewhat consultant?
I don't think he was a consultant. I think maybe for the business at the beginning, but I think very quickly there was a deal between my father and my uncle and their parents, which was to say, okay, we take over. We will pay you a fixed amount every year so that you can live. And they took on all the risks. It was
What a bold move. I mean, that speaks to his personality, but there was no, of course he had worked in the winery as a child, right? So he knew a little bit about it. And then at some point, your father went over to Bordeaux
rather,
to study, but was that after he made this statement to
yeah,
your grandfather? Okay.
yes, yes.
So he said, okay, yes, you have to step away. I'm going to go learn and then I'll come back once I'm.
Yes, it's even a little bit more tricky than that, because he actually made wines for a couple of years before actually going to Bordeaux. So we're talking 59, 60, 61. Then he went to Bordeaux, and then he continued his studies. He was an engineer at the time.
Okay.
And he also studied law, and then went to Bordeaux in 64, and then came back and made the wines more in what he would call maybe a Bordeaux fashion from 64 onwards to 70.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 70, he said, again, he came back to his original philosophy, which is the Phoenicians were doing it in a certain way. And as a result, what I'll do is I'll go back to the way I was doing them 10 years ago before studying, because he felt that this is what was um, the identity of his palate, not only of the terroir and maybe the Phoenicians' approach to winemaking, but his own palate as well. And so he started under Émile Pénaud,
Mm-hmm.
who is one of the great teachers at Bordeaux.
For sure.
And he had the visit, I think 10 or 15 years later, of Émile Pénaud, not at the winery, but at a wine fair. And so Émile Pénaud came to taste the wines, tasted them with my father, and, said, oh, Mr. Hochar, congratulations, really good wines. Bravo. And my father told him, I have to admit something. I made the wines in exactly the opposite way of what you taught us. And Emile Panot, I'd never met him actually, but a very bright man, and had the perfect answer, which was, Mr. Hochar, it's supposed to be very formal.
Yeah.
We had to give you knowledge. You needed to develop know-how. And that's the difference between theory and practice in a way. Theory is you need to know what's happening in the wine. What's the fermentation? What are the different issues that are occurring? Practice, or the know-how, is how do you adapt it to your terroir, to your land, to your geography, to how you transport the grapes from one place to the other, to how you blend, to which containers to use, and in the end, what is your palate? And it's all about your own palate and the way you taste. And this is where my father, I think, had an amazing ability, which was his palate. He would just taste everything, and he had this very elegant, refined vision of what a fine wine would be. Even though it was not necessarily traditional, and he just saw things and tasted things in a different way that people at the beginning maybe did not understand. But once they saw how the wines evolved, how they aged, and where they got to, yes, then people realized that he had this talent,
this finite sensibility. By the way, Max Cast, who I know you know, was our first in-person guest in this wine cellar here at Barrington, recounted a very similar story and said that he would love to drink a bottle of 1970 Musar with Emile and your father and discuss it with them because of that exact story. By the way, if you're not checking it out, this is the Wine Centric Show, and that's on our Instagram clips. Please check it out at Wine Centric Show.
We have a new sponsor on the Wine Centric Show, a whole wellness and wine experience with Conscious Strong and Lauren McLaughlin. And check it out.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. Yes, I'm Lauren McLaughlin, and I'm the founder of Conscious Strong, and just newly launched a Conscious Taste of Travel, which will bring about this interest in wellness and wine that has been a passion of mine for pretty much all my adult life. So that is in essence what I do. My background as a master Pilates trainer and guide led me to travel and led me to taking groups that then encompasses the love of wine.
I love that fusion, the combination of wellness and wine. So Conscious Taste is an extension of Conscious Strong, where you are going to curate these retreats.
Yes.
You're going to encompass wellness, meaning that the morning could be a conversation, it could be a walk, it could be a hike, it could be a yoga class. And then there's obviously going to be wine tasting and great food along with that as well, and great conversation to enhance the mind, the body, the spirit. Did I get that all right?
You did. You said that so beautifully.
Okay, that's Lauren at consciousstrong.com. Go to consciousstrong.com, look up Conscious Taste, email Lauren at consciousstrong.com, and you will curate an amazing wellness and wine experience that will, dare I say, change your life. And also, we are going to talk about Heather Donovan, the realtor extraordinaire. You have heard me talk about this wonderful person on the show many times. And guess what? She's here in person today. That's right. The realtor extraordinaire in the Triangle of North Carolina, Miss Heather Donovan. Heather, why did you decide to become a realtor?
Honestly, it's meeting the people. I mean, I've had some seriously beautiful, emotional closings, and you walk out of those someday, or seeing someone achieve their dream of buying their first home. I just had someone this year in their 50s that they were buying their first home, and like how exciting they were. And then there's personal touchers, like a buyer leaving a seller a gift, and they may not have realized was so meaningful. Like I had one last week that fit that category, and I drove home the whole way home like, this is why I love what I do.
Heather Donovan is truly a great resource. If you are looking for a home or just need great advice about all things realty, check out heatherdhomes.com.
You talked about this sensibility, but your grandfather had already established a pretty good rapport, and the wines were known, especially. And what I'll tell people is, people are I assume at least people might be like, well, why is this gentleman here from Lebanon and why is he speaking English with a French accent? And so yes, the French after World War I, as you've said, were in charge, essentially the mandate of what was then Lebanon. I don't think it was actual a country then, right? They drew the actual curved borders as they are now. And the story goes, I think that your grandfather, because the French like to drink wine, was giving them or selling them Chateau Musar at the time. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So when he started in 1930, the French army was posted there. Lebanon was had its new borders following World War One. It was a mandate, and the officers' mass or the officers wanted wine.
Yeah,
and that was not only Lebanon; it was also Syria and Turkey, and so they would buy the wines from my grandfather. Sometimes, I mean, they would pay for them, but they would say, "Okay, we need everything." Literally, I understood there were some years where they took literally every single bottle we produced. But at the same time, we were trying to develop also the Lebanese market.
Yeah,
people to get to drink wine. And I think what my grandfather did was, and that's a story that stays for me, and that my father would tell me when I was younger. You do whatever you want, whatever job, but no matter what you do, be the best.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a shoe shiner, be a shoe shiner, but just be the best shoe shiner. And so it was always a focus on quality, on premium. And when my grandfather started, from the beginning, we were selling wines in bottles. Whereas at the time, if you're talking between World War One and World War Two, even in Europe, it was not only bottles. A lot was sold in bulk.
Yeah.
And so,
or you bring your barrel or your jugs to the winery, they fill it up.
And they fill it up.
Yeah.
And so the idea for us was, and for my grandfather, was always premium, premium, premium quality, no matter what the price is. That's not it. Price is not the issue.
And so was that the main income for the family at that point in between when your grandfather was running it? Was the winery the main business?
Yeah. Yes, the only one. Actually, when my grandfather was younger, he was part of a family that owned the bank during the Ottoman Empire. Lent gold. Eventually, the Ottoman allowed the repayment in paper. So they got paper in return. Ottoman Empire blew up at the World War and the end of World War One, and was only paper worth zero. So my grandfather had to start from zero, although he grew up in a relatively wealthy family before.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, and people are thinking about well, okay, why are we talking about Lebanon, and why is this place so? It's a place that was originally thought of by being started in the ancient world by the Phoenicians. And I'm stealing your shine here, but as you've said, and I love talking about the ancient world. And as a matter of fact, I do a lot of talks on this, but about how the ancient world is still in our glass today as we experience it. But the Phoenicians were so important because they were seafarers. They were good at traveling. And so that they brought vines and wines to all other places around the world.
So around the Mediterranean.
Which then spread out over the world as we modernized and the world became more globalized, I'll say, cut to modern day. And so, yes, there is a history of the Ottomans, the Muslims and Christians, as your family is Christian. It's politically wild. How far is it 3 hours about from Beirut where the winery is in the Bekaa Valley?
Yes. So the winery was set up by my grandfather north of Beirut, in an old convent called the Musar convent, which is where the name Musar comes from. And it's in those cellars that he initially started making the wines, but it's in a village, and basically in that area, there are no vineyards. And because he didn't own any land, anything, not even the winery at the time, it was his cousins, he asked farmers to plant. And the most obvious place to plant was in the Bekaa Valley, which is east of Beirut in the mountains.
Okay.
And this Bekaa Valley, which is nestled between, it's at 3,000 feet of altitude, nestled between two mountains, one which is the border with Syria to the east, and one which is the Mount Lebanon range, which is in the middle of the country. And it's from there that, this is the Bekaa is the breadbasket of Lebanon. This is where the Temple of Bacchus was built by the Romans, and a testament to the history of winemaking that existed for so many years, so many centuries in the area. And from there, he we would just put all the grapes in trucks and then transport them 3 hours in the sun, and probably in the worst conditions you could ever do it.
No.
No, but yes, actually, because, if you go to enology school and say, okay, I'm going to pick my grapes in the morning.
Yeah. Or at night.
Or at night, but in our case, early morning.
Yeah.
Put them in a big truck, no refrigeration, no crating, no nothing, just all literally put together, 10, 15 tons, and then travel around 3 hours in the sun before it gets to the winery. You don't get your diploma. Really, you'll fail.
Yeah.
But this is how we do it.
But just to unpack that, the reasons that you're scared of that is, well, one, the grapes touching everything in that truck. God knows what yeasts are naturally already happening there. Then you have the sun. Then you have the weight of the grapes on it. So you get carbonic maceration. You get unnatural yeast smells that you don't want. And then you have beginning of fermentation before you even get
Potentially.
to the winery.
Potentially. 3 hours is okay.
Okay.
It's manageable. But the reason it works is that we have a very dry climate in Lebanon. In the Bekaa Valley at 1,000 meters, you have almost no rain, or literally normally no rain between April and October.
Okay.
And we harvest in between August and September. And so no humidity. And no humidity means no pests.
Yeah.
If you had more issues in a wetter or more humid climate, we probably would not be able to do what you do. But we are where we are, and it's the region, and we're blessed with that. And it probably inoculates part of the juice, part of the grapes, part of the whole thing in terms of doing this transit of 3 hours. Maybe it helps it. Wine it's a combination of millions of things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's a living thing.
Yeah.
It evolves all the time, and so as with life, you always discover that, it's a combination of a lot of things that you don't control. And today, to be honest, if I would to take a winery, build it in the Bekaa, and do the same wines, same way, same everything, it will be different wines because of the place, because the bacteria in the air that trigger the fermentation would be different, but also because maybe there isn't this transportation phase of 3 hours, and maybe that changes the way the wines behave. I don't know.
You don't know.
I mean, it's everything's a gamble here.
Right. But and so segueing into talking about Chateau Musar and why it's known internationally, I mean, that is part of the philosophy, and the reason is that it is what it is. And what the wine gives you, what the vintage gives you is part of your identity. It's part of your DNA. So that's, I don't know, I'm speaking for you, but is that probably why you guys have been so successful internationally? I mean, if you talk to any wine professional who knows their stuff, they know Chateau Musar, they know the pedigree, they know the fact that you hold your wines back. This is the 2018 that we have on the table. This is current release.
Correct.
So that's 7 years. That's also part of your identity. Nowadays, I think in somewhat of more trendy wine lists, you'll see some other Lebanese producers on there. And as a matter of fact, I was reading something on 750.com, which was saying for years, and maybe even still, Musar actually is not as well known within its own country as it is internationally. Is that true?
Yes.
Still today?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Well, before 75, we used to sell, so the beginning of the Civil War, we used to sell 100% in Lebanon. Within a couple of years, when the war started, our whole market disappeared in terms of sales. We were still producing and not selling. And so it forced us to go outside.
Okay.
The blessing in disguise, if you want to call it. So my father then showed the wines at the Bristol Wine Fair in the UK for the first time in 79. Michael Broadbent, who was a wine critic at the time, the most famous one, spotted the wines, tasted them, loved them, talked about them, declared them the wine of the fair, the wine discovery of the fair. And so we got known a little bit more at that point. And in 1984, Decanter magazine, who's the biggest wine magazine in the UK, started making an award for, at the time it was called the Man of the Year. Today it's called the Personality of the Year. And in 84, my father was the first one to get that prize. So, before,
Which was, I mean, that was huge. Like, no, even at that time, I mean, California wines weren't even thought of maybe internationally, like maybe domestically, but they weren't thought of. And to think of outside of the traditional powers of France, Italy, and Spain in 1984 was remarkable.
yeah, again, it was the first time.
Yeah.
And and so he came before, the Romain et Conti, the Petrus owners and producers, a lot of the big names. And so that really propelled us into the limelight, at least with the British readers.
Okay.
And so that allowed really to grow Musar. And so by the end of the Civil War, so 91, sorry, we were selling 100% outside of Lebanon.
Wow.
And 0 in Lebanon. And then we came back to now we're at around 15% in Lebanon. All of the wines are available everywhere in the world and also in Lebanon, but the Lebanese market focuses mainly on the, I would say, more entry-level wines. And, it's 4 million people. The world is now 9 billion people.
Yeah.
So there's potential outside. So we don't necessarily make an effort only to sell in Lebanon or only outside. It's just based on where the demand is. And that's it. And so, yes, we tend to be less well-known in Lebanon because we do less of the marketing effort that others have to do in Lebanon to sell in Lebanon because they don't have the ability to sell somewhere else. We make the effort somewhere else because we feel that this is what the wines deserve in terms of not necessarily recognition, but the ability to reach more people. And then, then everybody decides what they want to buy.
That's very cool. And I love when there is a dot to dot connection of the story, and that, because I think like you were talking about your father, Serge, like he would never give you the answer to your question. You just gave me a direct answer to why Musar has received such acclaim. So I appreciate that. I need things explained to me bluntly. So,
okay. That's right. It's good that I'm here, not my father. Then,
although that would make for especially today, that would make for a really interesting conversation.
Yes.
So let's dive into the place even more. So, we do represent in North Carolina some other Lebanese wines, and so I do know a little bit about it. And I know that like you can basically in the winter, I think, ski in the morning and then go to the sea in the afternoon. Is that accurate?
Yes. I mean, so when you're in Beirut and it snows, you can see the mountains that are all of a sudden covered with snow, and you just go up. And, so it takes, depending on traffic, anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours.
Yeah.
You go up skiing. If you're somebody who's lived in Europe or in a more northern country and you're willing to accept cold water, then you're definitely able to come back down and, an hour later be in the sea.
Yeah.
Swim in the sea. To be honest, I've never done it.
Okay.
Because I'm a chicken for cold water. And, I prefer, 28, 29 degrees in the summer. When you swim, you can spend 2 hours in the sea because it's just so warm. It's pleasant.
Yeah.
But that's a very unique geography that we have.
Yeah. And what else? So obviously centuries of history tell us that this place is great for grape growing. You have some indigenous varietals in there, and then you've also incorporated some French varietals, we'll say, although Syrah is arguably not French, even though it's mostly known for there. But what varietals are you growing there? And tell us what's the calling card of Musar?
Yes. Calling card is, let's talk about the varietals. So in our reds, when my grandfather started, he asked farmers to plant, as I mentioned earlier. And because he had been to France, tasted wines in France, because we also speak French in Lebanon, it was natural for him to go and source grapes from France. There were also some Jesuits who, 50 or 60 years prior to that, had brought in some varietals from Rhone via Algeria.
Okay.
Where they were planted initially by the French. And then they thought, it works in Algeria, it might work in Lebanon. So it came to Lebanon. So it was natural to go towards French varietals for the reds after phylloxera had decimated anything that existed in terms of red varietals in Lebanon in the early 1900s.
You did have phylloxera in Lebanon.
Yes.
Because, okay, so I'm just curious about that because you were saying about the humidity and about pests not getting in, but phylloxera got in, little else that could.
Yes.
But I guess that phylloxera does it.
But it's different. It's not a fungus.
Yeah.
It's not a fungus that's affected. Fungi come from humidity and things like that. Phylloxera, I mean, you bring in a cutting or anything that is from,
and it just
getting
the soils and eat everything.
Yeah. Okay. So for the reds, he had to plant, and he planted mostly round varietals because of their ability to resist to heat. Then he also made friends, and he got very close friends to Ronald Barton of Léoville-Barton, Château Léoville-Barton. And I think that's where the connection brought in the Cabernet Sauvignon into the equation.
So that's interesting because Léoville-Barton is a famous house in Saint-Julien. Saint-Julien, one of the most elegant, I'll use this word for lack of a better word, feminine style of Cabernet on the left bank. So is it the same cuttings from Saint-Julien then? Do you know?
That I don't know. Okay. I don't know. But that was the inspiration.
Okay.
Definitely. And I think it's that connection that brought Cabernet to the equation in Lebanon at Musar. And actually, my uncle is called Ronald on the back of the relationship, the friendship that my grandfather had with Ronald Barton. So that's for the reds. For the whites, we use two local varietals, Obeide and Terroir. They actually are not resistant to phylloxera, as far as I understand, but they were in more remote villages, higher up in the mountains, not in the Bekaa Valley floor. So as long as nobody would bring cuttings and everything that would bring phylloxera to those villages, these varietals and these vines would survive. It's actually
you can put it here
and blow it up. That's the
right here. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, this is a 2018 vintage. This is also the current release of the white wine. So just go speak to how unique you are.
And ageability. Yes.
Yes. And so was Obeide and Merwan, is there historical evidence that these grapes were planted as far back as the Phoenicians? Do you have that or?
Look, Jesus figured out a trick that we haven't figured out, which is to turn water into wine. But the Phoenicians had to work it. And these varietals only exist there. So it's not that anybody would have taken them from somewhere else and planted them because you would have found them somewhere else.
Right.
Initially, we thought they were the ancestors of Chasselas and Sémillon.
Okay.
But with the DNA being available in the last 20 years, they are not. They're really unique.
They're all.
And if they are their own, it means that they are from there since ever.
Yeah.
And this is actually what gives them this ability to age, to ripen so slowly, to only reach 12 degrees of alcohol. We harvest them after the reds in October, which is a very rare event for whites, unless you're doing obviously botrytis and sweet wines. But these are dried vines, and so their ability to resist has been built through the natural evolution of the vines surviving in this environment.
Yeah, learning your environment, and then you just develop natural detractors.
Yes, to survive.
Yeah,
and to develop and to reproduce. So I think yes, they are local, and they're and in a sense they create what is probably the biggest identity wine for Lebanon. So when my grandfather started producing whites, he used those because they were available.
Yeah. But he had to plant though. Did your grandfather have to? He did not plant.
Not the whites.
Not the whites.
So the whites, because they were local, existed were usually just grapes to eat, but also to produce arak, which is the anise-based spirit. Not anise-based, anise flavored.
Yeah, wine-based anise flavored, kind of like similar to the Greeks make ouzo, if anybody's ever had that. Yeah, or sambuca, the Italians make.
Yeah.
Sambuca doesn't come from wine grapes, so I don't believe so.
I don't know, but I think sambuca also has sugar, whereas we don't have sugar.
Right.
It's really zero sugar spirit, but the sweetness or the impression of sweetness is really the anise seeds that gives you this
impression of sweetness. Yeah.
And so the whites were always there. And, so he thought, okay, I'll make wine out of them. Again, it was a challenge for people, in Lebanon, people would understand them because they didn't have a choice. When we started exporting, people would not understand our whites. There was a phase where we were not producing, not selling. My uncle at one point, I remember, told my father, let's stop producing them.
Yeah.
And my father was adamant. They have an identity that is very unique. They have a space. There's a reason they're there. Again, this philosophical approach, if they survived, it means that there's a reason. They have to end up somewhere in a glass. And as we were developing the methodology of making them, I mean, the wine world started to realize that what this style of wines represents. And you have a lot of wines now that are moving towards the style. Now, you could compare them to Jura wines, okay? But Jura wines tend to be a little bit heavier, bolder, but it's the similar type of profile, except that I think our wines are probably a bit more elegant. Jura wines will evolve, I think, a bit less over time. Our wines, I mean, this particular white, we sell after 7 years. It ages, 50, 60 years as a dry. I think the Jura wines could probably do that as well, but I don't know if any of the Jura producers are as crazy as we are in terms of keeping so many, such an old library of old vintages.
Well, they have their hands busy with making the vin jaune, so that probably takes up a lot of time and energy.
Yes, maybe, and
the yellow wine,
which has skin contact, and when you actually look at the Musar, when they're young, you don't feel that there's maybe skin contact because the still color is light. After 5-10 more years, the color is darker. People look at them and say, either it's a sweet wine or it's a vin jaune, as in a wine with skin contact. And it's neither of them.
Yeah.
It's just a natural evolution of what these specific varietals can make.
Speaking of which, that reminds me, are you guys playing around with this phenomenon of orange wine having skin contact on grapes that are made for white wine? Because you make two rosés, I know, but yeah,
on the whites, we don't need to.
Okay.
Because you would do it if your juice doesn't have enough intensity, in my opinion, and you need to give it a little bit more of a kick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's a style. Huh? Some people might decide, okay, I want my wines to be much, much bigger, and therefore I go with the skin contact. For us, because we have so low yields, because we have our organic vineyards with the very wide plantings, we don't irrigate, dry farming. So all of that leads to extremely intense flavors because of the low concentrate, not the low, the low yields that we have in our vineyards. And I think and also because they are harvested so late, also that means you end up with something that is much more intense than when you would typically have if you harvest earlier.
So you're harvesting the reds before you're harvesting your white grapes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before the Obaid and the Marois. Yes, absolutely.
That's different almost than I can't think of another wine region that does that. Unless, like you said, they're harvesting late harvest wines or botrytized wines.
Exactly. So we don't need the
contact that you have it.
We have it. We don't use stems, your reds or the whites. Again, we de-stem. We don't need to. Because there's enough matter, there's enough
is this
everything in there in the juice.
The low yields are just by way of natural process. There's no laws or legal regulations for it. But this is a AOC system. There's nothing like that in Lebanon.
It's our own decision. I mean, you have other wineries in Lebanon that use trellises and irrigate. We are old school, hand done, hand farming, everything. Wide plantings, bush vines, and no water.
All of them are bush vines, which we'll have to put up a graphic of what the difference is next to it, the trellis versus a bush vine. But that's it. And that's, again, just in that philosophy of this was what was naturally here. So this is what we're going to naturally take of it.
Yes. But also there's another issue, which is if you, at first, that's the philosophy. I agree. But then the other issue is that if you start irrigating, you end up with less concentration. And if you are on trellises, you need to irrigate because your grapes are exposed to heat. So a bush vine has the advantage of protecting the clusters through the canopy that's a bit all over the place.
Yeah. So I just want to unpack that for people. So general sense, for great winemaking, the vines need to struggle, meaning if they don't have water, they're naturally going to grow roots as deep as they can to find water underneath the ground. And thus the idea is they'll be a stronger vine for years and years to come, and thus ultimately produce better fruit with more tension, more higher quality, which will then result in better wine.
The better ones.
Yeah.
So the way I think about it or talk about it is that if you have a lot of vines or many vines per square kilometer or per square mile or whatever, there's a limited amount of nutrients that the
Plant can get.
the plant can get from the soil, and then it's going to spread it over the clusters. If you limit the number of plants, those nutrients get concentrated into those limited amount of plants. If you limit the number of clusters, which are the number of grapes that you have on each one, by reducing the quantity, then again, that limited amount of nutrients that was a bit more concentrated through lesser vines, all of a sudden is even more intense because it's focused on just a few clusters.
Right.
And this is when you get real intense.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of like, I think Burgundy, the rule is you have to have 35 hectoliters per hectare minimum to your juice. Like, do you know the ratio of your Lebanon? Yeah. Or in the how about it, like at Musar, what you guys
at Musar?
Yeah.
20 to 25 hectoliters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And Burgundy is on the low side.
Yeah.
If you go to Italy, you're at 70. You're at 70 on average, So we're at, depending on what you compare us to, but we're between 40% and, 25%.
Wow.
Of a normal production. And so although, we talked about natural winemaking, which is the approach, or non-interventionist approach that we have, that is really also a combination with the low yields. And together it creates, Musar.
Yeah. Wines of intensity. And so where did this philosophy, again, of this aging process come from? Like I said, these are both white and reds. The thought of probably people are like, what the hell are you talking about? That's a 2018. That can't be the current release. But you guys aging these wines essentially for the people, or maybe deciding, okay, this is when we think our wines are ready. When did that come about?
You have to be crazy. First, you have to be crazy because it's not natural to wait so long. I mean, if you're buying a piece of land today, if you're starting a winery, you buy a piece of land today, you plant it. Takes you 1 year. You then need 3 to 4 years to start getting grapes. Unless you're at 4 years or 5 years. And you create a wine that you're going to sell after 7 years. It means that the difference between when you sell your first bottle and the day you planted or bought your land is 12 years. There's no way you can start like that.
Yeah.
So when my grandfather started, it was mostly current vintage wines, so entry level and current, and wines that were sold within 1 or 2 years. But I think when my father came in, he started extending the period of bottling from 1 to 2 to eventually 3 years. And the longer you wait before you bottle, the more the wine needs to be ready afterwards before you drink it. So if you bottle at year 2, you can drink at year 4 or year 3. If you bottle at year 1, you can drink at year 1.5, 2. If you bottle at year 3, for us, ideal scenario, you wait until year 7 before you release. And you build it up. So our entry-level wines would be sold faster, and the Chateau would be sold, the Chateau, which is our top label, would be sold later.
So to understand that, are you basically saying that the wines are getting more and more accustomed to this environment of not being bottled? Then once you put them in a bottle, it's going to take them even that much longer to get accustomed to that environment. Thus, we don't want people drinking them for another 4 years. Is that essentially the thought behind it?
The thought behind it is the same. It's not that I don't want them to drink it. It would be easier for me to sell after year 3. But they're not ready. And they might be misunderstood. And they might not be appreciated for what they are. Now, ideally, if you know Musar, and we had our tasting earlier, you know that our wines start to really show well, in my opinion, at 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
I can't wait 20, 25 years before releasing the wine.
Yeah. You would be destitute.
Yeah. I live it, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So we have to start selling them at some point. We sold them at some point at year 6 because we had to release 2 vintages in parallel because the production was so small. Now we're back at 7 years because we had a bigger vintage in 18 vintage actually. But we feel that this is the right time. We could tweak it by 1 or 2 years. It's not, but the principle is that they need time.
Yeah.
And they evolve so much afterwards that even at 7 years, a lot of people love them, drink them. But if I fast forward 10 years later and I tell them, by the way, this is a bottle that I brought from the future and brought it back to you, and this is what this same wine will taste in 10 years, they'll say, okay, I guess I should wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other beautiful thing about Musar is that you have kept such an extensive library that a lot of these wines are available. Like you still have, I think actually in my cellar right now, I meant to bring this today, but I have a 99.
Okay.
It was out of half bottle. I had opened it back in May and it was delicious, youthful, vibrant. I mean, exactly. And there you go. That's 26 years. So it was drinking like perfectly
As a half,
dancing out of the glass,
as a half bottle,
as a half bottle,
which
right?
usually ages faster actually.
Yeah, it was 26 years. That's right.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, that, and for you out there that are, buyers or sommeliers writing wine lists, I highly encourage you, or you're a collector, I highly encourage you to talk to your, distributor, your wholesaler and say, what back vintages of Musar? And this is not a sales thing, but this is improves the ageability of your list and shows vintage variety there. So, that is one of the keys to doing it, and Musar helps you and does that. So the blends, and I loved how you explained this. I never thought of it this way before, but like your wines, the reds are always based on Cinsault and Cabernet Sauvignon, and then in the middle there's a bridge. In the Musar, the Chateau wine, the highest tier, you have Carignan as that bridge. In other ones, you have Grenache, Syrah, and it's come on. There's Tempranillo now, which I'm really enjoying. But I want to know, you said something extremely interesting. You choose, because of this aging process, you essentially choose the second wines, the younger wines, before you choose the Chateau wines, which is a model that's, if I'm understanding it correctly, which is a model that's very different from even Bordeaux.
We choose, yeah. What you mean by choosing is that we choose the vats that go into the entry-level wines earlier. They choose. They are bottled earlier. So we need to make a choice that is definite for the younger wines and what we blend in terms of, because Cinsault goes into our forward wines, we know some Cinsault will go in here, etc. We bottle the first ones, and then with whatever is left goes into the Chateau. Now, what's left?
But that's what I'm saying is different. If you have let's just talk about Growth Bordeaux. They're going to go in and they're going to be like, oh, this is a great vat. That's a great vat. That's going into our number one wine. And then what doesn't make it into that is going to go into our second wine. And you're doing the opposite of
No. So the timing is different.
Okay.
But the decision is roughly the same.
Okay.
So when we harvest, we ferment, and we start to see a real wine forming. Most of our wines are blended between 6 months and 1 year when they're the younger ones. So by then we already know which wine of Cinsault would go into the Chateau. We have an idea.
Okay.
Then we know what goes into, let's say, the Musar Jeune. We put it in Musar Jeune. Once we're left with everything that we thought would go in the Chateau, we come to the blend of the Chateau. Then, yes, maybe we realize, okay, there's one vat that doesn't fit, or that one vat that throws off the harmony or the balance of your wines. Then we take it out. But initially, we haven't done a blend before year 2 of the Chateau. So yes, we did use some of the other wines, but we have an idea. We think, the right Cinsault that should go in the Chateau is this. So we keep them aside. When we come to do it at year 2, the other ones are already done. These vats are still left. And then we have to make a decision. Most of the time, we get it right. But life, sometimes we don't get it right.
So what happens with, do you make a different bottling? Is it what do you do with the juice that doesn't make the cut for Chateau Musar?
We distill it.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
We distilled.
But that's kind of a shame, no? Because like, arguably, if you initially thought it was good enough for the Chateau level, that it could have gone into Levantine or June or Hochar Berry Feast or something.
Usually it's with me. I mean, it's rare that we end up with a blend that doesn't work afterwards, but it can happen. It's happened. It definitely has happened. That's for sure.
Take me in to the room behind the scenes in the blending trials. Yeah. And you joined the winery at 2010. So there was a part where you were sitting there with your dad, your winemaker, Tariq, and
Gaston,
your brother. So it was the four of you at one point.
Yes.
Has it changed a lot since your dad left? Meaning, like, are you guys now more in sync, or is it more difficult because I assume he was somewhat of the alpha in the room and said, "Well, like at the end of the day, we're going with dad's decision of it."
Definitely what you just said.
Okay.
The question is, how do we manage today? With the three of us. The final call comes down to Gaston, to my brother.
Okay.
Because that's
how you guys.
That's the hierarchy. That was, first son of the first son gets the name of the grandfather, and that's how it goes. And he's been there for now 30 years.
So he was at the winery before you were.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. So it makes sense. And he's in charge also of the winery part. I travel a lot. I spend a lot of time, with markets abroad and with covering our UK market. So,
I just one question about it, and maybe this is just my perspective because I see you here in the US, but you are the public face of the winery at this point. No, like if CNN was to get a quote from, a Hochar, you would be the person that would be on the interview. No? Or would that be a toss up?
If it's CNN, it's in the US, it's more likely that it's going to be me.
Okay.
If it's in Lebanon, it would be Gaston.
I see.
So if CNN goes to the winery to visit, it will be him.
Okay.
It depends. It's not that it depends on the markets. I mean, we have different skills. We're very complementary, Gaston and I. And I have a cousin, by the way, also who's working with us. But really, in terms of Gaston and myself, he's the one at the winery. I'm the one outside.
Okay.
I push him. He pushes me. He likes to do things in a certain way. I'm happy to just spend my time, a lot of time traveling and meeting people. And, it's a character thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, there's no such rule. It's not that, he is the final decision maker on the blending.
Okay.
So in the end, he has to take that responsibility on just because he's the eldest and he's been around obviously at the winery for the longest.
Okay.
So it makes sense and it's a fair and logical step.
So take me back to my initial question. What is that like in the blending room?
So the blending room is zillions of combinations of how we take all the vats. Because we can take out some, as we said, there are some press wines that we can add. There's a lot of different things that
and are you all sitting there scoring them with like a bunch of different samples in front of you and quietly scoring, or it's an open discussion throughout the whole process?
No, it's an open discussion.
Okay.
So what will happen? First, there's a filtering of the different vats to make sure there's nothing flawed or nothing that has developed badly since they were last tasted. Once we figure out all the vats that are good, different plots of land, different varietals, we all bring them in. And then we say, okay, these are, let's say, 4 or 5 different possible blends. Keeping out some vats that may have either very high sugars or very high acidity or something that, either taking it out or adding a little bit of it, and then we start to tweak. Let's say we end up with 4, 5, 6 different possible blends. And then we chat. Friendly. Yeah. Friendly chat. No, friendly chat, of course.
Okay.
And
I must imagine though, at some point, some vintages are a bit more discussions.
No, not heated, but where we debate. Gaston has the final say. I have an opinion. Tarek has an opinion. We each maybe like one style. I know Tarek tastes different than I do. Gaston tastes different than I do. I taste different from my father's taste. Everything's different.
Yeah.
So we usually each may like one slightly tweaked version, but we agree on what is the Musar blend.
Yeah.
As in what is the signature of Chateau Musar. and and that's the one we go for, which I think I mentioned it earlier, is not necessarily the best wine
Right.
at the time, or the one that pleases, particular palate. It's the one where we feel it represents the continuity and the consistency of the wines. Not that of the lineage of Musar. Not that it has to repeat a taste that existed in previous years, but it's just that it has the vibrancy, the acidity, maybe this quirk, this tweak that happens at Musar that really defines Musar. It has to be there. If a wine is too perfect, it's not Musar.
Has it happened on numerous occasions where you have chosen a wine because it was more the typical Musar than the wine that you liked, but that you preferred, like drinking?
Yes.
How often does that happen?
I mean, my father passed away in 2015, so we've been blending 10 years now.
Well, have you blended no.
So
yeah.
no. So sorry, it's not 10 years. It's 8 years. Yeah. Some years we did not agree. Definitely. And it took a while to agree. Tarek likes more fruit, and clear. I like more elegance. Gaston sits in the middle. I don't like acidity. My father loved acidity. There's no formula.
Yeah.
There's no formula. And yeah, so we argue and we discuss. And so what happens is that we then taste blind. We go back,
like once the decision has been made, then you go like confirm it.
Yeah.
From a blind look. Yes. Okay. Can you bring us inside, not to get sensational, but can you bring us inside one of like the bigger disagreements that happened, or like, was there a particular vintage that was like really got contentious?
Contentious? No. But learning curve, yes.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example. We had one blend where we figured out everything that should go in. We had one additional vat that we could include, but we weren't managing to be convinced of how much of it to include in the blend. 0, 25, 50, 75, 100%. So we did 5 blends and tasted them blind after 3 days. And when we were tasting them, your natural inclination is, because there's a 0, 25, 50, 75, is that you want to put them in this order, and you want to control. And it's not an ego thing, but it's a natural thing. I taste here, I don't taste acidity, because that vat had a bit of acidity. So it means it's 0. This one is a bit more acidic, then it's 25, then it's 50, and so you're focusing on trying to figure out what is what, rather than what is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the debate, and I remember very well saying, guys, we're not trying to figure out which one is what. We're trying to figure out which one is good. Yeah. And so in the end, we figured out which one was good. But we looked at the results in terms of which one is good. And then we each thought, okay, this one is 0, this is 25, this is 50, this is, and then we looked at the results, and it wasn't in the right order. Meaning where most of us agreed that this has 0, most agreed this is 100, but the 25, 50, and 75 was not what we tasted, or the impression of what you tasted in terms of increase in acidity. It was not a linear evolution.
Yeah.
And it's maybe because there's a compensation factor where maybe some of the acidity existed already in the rest of the wines, and adding a bit more at one point was compensated by something else. And then, so
yeah, it's the sum of many different parts and how they come together.
So that's where that was a huge learning curve. Not about which one was the best wine, because that eventually we agreed upon, but your perception of how you taste and what you think is right, or what you think is in there, is actually not right.
That's got to be so hard to remove ego from that. Especially, I mean, it sounds like you have a very healthy relationship with your brother. It sounds like your family is like something really special, but even the best of families, you have a sibling rivalry where you're like, I want to be right here. And, I'm an accomplished taster myself. I know what this is supposed to taste like. And there you go. But ultimately,
look, it's not ego. I don't think ego drives
Well,
us.
ego in the sense of like, oh, I want to be right. I want to know that I'm a talented enough taster to pick out which percentages, which are percentages.
Yes.
And you have to put that aside to do that.
Yes, you have to. But I mean, I guess probably it's a family thing. It's how we grew up. I mean, I don't think there's a rivalry.
Yeah.
With my brother. On the contrary, I think we're very complementary, which makes it work. And whatever decision he finally takes, I'll accept, and vice versa. I think so there's no ego per se in terms of I want to be right. I think what's important is getting it right for the brand, for the consistency, because me getting it right, and if it's wrong for the business, it's not the right thing
for anybody.
Yeah, and it's a lose-lose.
Yeah,
and you never get it right all the time. We know that. So you have to push an opinion, but if at one point, you have to understand when you're wrong, either when you're wrong or when this is not the right thing to push.
Well, all I'm saying is, I don't know if you have children, Marc.
I have one. So
I have 2 boys.
Yes.
And my greatest achievement in life, if I can bring them up without having any rivalry. So I'll take lessons from you and your brother. And
I don't know. Lessons, no, but I mean, it's
the example.
The example. I think in Lebanon, we're more traditional. I mean, we have families where siblings fight, and it's big businesses that fight, and it's all over the press. But within our family, it's always been about support and sticking together.
Amazing.
It's not easy, but it works. It's easier. So my grandfather was alone. My father and my uncle were 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
My brother, myself, and my cousin were cousins. So we still know each other quite well. The challenge is the next generation.
Right.
Because they're second-degree cousins, further away from each other. Some living in Lebanon, some in Australia, some, my daughter grew up in Europe mostly. So they know each other less. So the challenge is the next generation.
Is there an interest are they showing interest that they want to take over?
There's one of the daughters of my brother who's interested. So she's now 30. So, old enough to have done her own path and then willing now to make a switch. For the moment, she's the only one. We will see.
Yeah. That seems to be a recurring problem amongst when you get to the 3rd generation of chateaus, is the first family creates it, the next generation makes it better, and then somehow it seems like the 3rd generation, although you're on your 4th generation.
We're on 3rd, moving to 4th.
You're on that. You would be right, moving to 4th. So,
and it's the biggest challenge. I mean, to be honest, if we were in another environment, in terms of country with more stability, less issues locally, it would be easier. But most of the Lebanese tend to go and study abroad, work abroad. What we have is really linked to land. And when I was younger, I basically told my father, I'll come. And that was 2 years after, I told my father I'd come and join 2 years after I started working. As in, like, give me 2 years and then I'll come back. It took me 22 years.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't even planned at 20. It just happened at 22. So you don't know, because I didn't want to be linked to the land in Lebanon because of growing up and during the war.
Yeah.
And now we've had this issue again with 5 very difficult years in Lebanon. The financial crisis, COVID, the explosion at the port, a recent war, political mess. So it's not an easy environment to tell a 25 or 30-year-old person to come and resettle in Lebanon. But hopefully I'm optimistic. Cautiously optimistic. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And if it's survived for 6,000 plus years, survive another, 6,000 more.
But I hope so too. We'll make sure we'll try to make it happen.
All right, sure. Marc, last question, and then we'll get you on your way. I know this is a hard question, and it's also a little bit rote, but
I don't know what rote means.
Meaning like cliche-ish, normal. Okay. So I'll give you that disclaimer. But
okay,
Do you have a favorite vintage, or is there a vintage that you like think about and you're like, I want to taste that again. I want to go back to it. And by the way, I know I'm asking that question to somebody who has professed about their wine, where every time you open a bottle of Musar, whether it be the same vintage or a different vintage, it's a different experience. But is there one that you have realized and made you, every time you taste it, you're like, I want that experience again?
I don't want an experience again.
Okay. But maybe
by definition.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want a new experience.
Okay.
Maybe with the same wine,
Okay.
but a new one. In a sense that I don't do copy paste of opening a bottle and tasting the same thing. For me, this is not what wine is about. Wine is about a new experience every time you open a bottle.
Yeah.
Because it depends on the people, depends on the environment, depends on the food, depends on everything. You know, we opened this bottle now of Red 18. Earlier at the tasting, it was tasted in a certain way. We opened it now. I told you at the beginning, for me, this sounds reductive and not taste reductive compared to the normal bottle. I just don't believe in the copy paste repeat. And so and then in that sense, I'm lucky because our wines are not that experience, because we don't format them, because we don't put them in a box. We don't do anything that's, you know, going to control
That's rote or cliche.
Okay. Thank you. That's a new word I've learned. So I'm not really, even if I prefer a certain vintage because I have not better, like more interesting experiences with some of them. I'm not looking to repeat, but and I don't have, one vintage that I prefer necessarily. I like just our wines beyond 20 to 25 years.
Okay.
Just because they move to this evolved state where they're not just about fruit and they are about something else in addition to fruit.
Okay. Can you tell me, when we get out of here, one vintage that you've had recently that was a really fantastic experience?
White or red?
Either.
There's so many of them. My tendency is to go in our reds, towards our vintages that have a little bit of a lighter structure.
Okay.
So where, maybe Château is a bit more dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really enjoy 98 as a vintage. But it's evolving, you know. 5 years ago, I really fell in love with 98 and I was just going all the time for 98. Now it's evolving, it's changing. You have other vintages that were younger that are coming into what I call the great drinkability zone, or period for Musar.
Their prime, as we would call it now.
Yes. And so there's not necessarily taking over, but, you know, getting close to. But again, you know, every cork is different. Every bottle is different. Every environment is different. So, I mean, I could open a 98 and be disappointed.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that is fine. I'll be disappointed on the spot. But in the big scheme of things, in the big picture, it's part of having a wine that changes. I mean, it's life. You know, you can't be happy here. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's my opinion. It doesn't exist. Because if you don't have the dip, you don't understand the top.
Well said. Well, Marc, I really appreciate you joining us here on the Wine Centric Show and sharing your wisdom, sharing your wines, and all the stories from your family. So I will tell all of you out there, go get yourself some Chateau Musar or any of the wines that they make, and you will drink deliciously.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. That was a real pleasure.